Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Into the Blue in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, Prologue. Elith blasts a spell towards the Agarthan soldier. Seath. Byleth shakes the unconscious man on the ground. Seath, wake up. She curses, emitting white magic from her hands. The man coughs, slowly opening his eyes. Your Grace, he says weakly. Byleth jerks up her head to see a Titaness aim its attack towards their direction. With every ounce of her strength, she picks Seath up, lunging away from the Titaness sword swing. She loops Seath's arm around her, dragging him away from the fight. Cyril. She calls out to the boy on the wyvern. His eyes widen when he sees Seath's battered state. Your Grace. Seath. Is he still alive? Get him out of here. Byleth says urgently, handing Seath over to him, gently but hastily securing him up the wyvern. Seek medical aid at once and report to the kingdom of Faerghus of our danger. No, Seath grunts, his hand pressing against his rib. Your Grace, I won't leave you alone. Enough, Seath. Please, you have to inform the kingdom of our threat. Tell His Majesty Dimitri of this danger. Her words are final as she locks eyes on Cyril. This is an order. Cyril grits his teeth, evidently as reluctant as Seath to retreat. But slowly, he nods, zooming past her in rapid speed, away from the grounds of Shamhala. Byleth unsheaths her sword, scanning their surroundings. They're at a disadvantage. Agarthan soldiers corner her knights left and right, and there are no signs of the Titaness weakening. Even Catherine is evidently starting to tire out. Thales is still secured by his barriers, controlling the tides of the battle behind the scenes. Byleth closes her eyes in frustration. She has no more divine pulses left. They're after you, my child. Rhea had warned her about what was to come in this fight. Then if that's the case. Catherine. Byleth yells after her. Gather all surviving troop members and retreat. The swordswoman turns to her, face crestfallen. What? Your Grace, we can't. They're only looking for me. That is why it is our job to protect you. We cannot jeopardize your safety and leave you in the hands of the enemy. Catherine, Byleth squeezes her eyes shut in concentration. You are the one who wields the sword of the Creator. Byleth opens her eyes, handing the sword urgently to Catherine, who stares at it in astonishment. Protect the sword of the Creator and return it back to Lady Rhea. She orders. I leave it to you to secure it at the church. Protect this with your life, do you understand? But Your Grace. I won't die here. She promises. I swear on my life that no matter what happens, I will return. Now go. Catherine's shocked face shifts into one of resolve. Understood. Without another word, Catherine dashes out, yelling for the troops to retreat with her. They have the sword of the Creator. One of the soldiers yell. Immediately, Byleth unsheaths her rapier, slashing down anybody who tries to chase after the weapon. Adrenaline courses throughout her body as she takes enemies down one by one, effortlessly dodging attacks made left and right by soldiers and Titaness combined. At the corner of her eye, she still sees the remnants of her troops retreating. She lets out a battle cry as she swings the sword, cutting down foes all at once while blasting spells at the Titaness. Suthies, give me strength to control the hands of time for just a bit more. Buy them a little bit more time. As if the goddess listened to her plea, glass shatters around her, transporting her in fragments towards enemies in a blink of an eye. Rewinding then striking like a broken loop. One by one, the enemies fall by her hand, and she manages to destroy the device that controlled the Titaness. The Shamhala ground stained in blood by the vessel of the progenitor goddess is enough to make Thales roar in anger, breaking out of his barrier. You will not win, Suthies. A black hole forms out of thin air by his bare hands, reminding her of a familiar sight. The abyss, she realizes. She doesn't have the sword of the Creator with her this time. If it devours her, she will surely be dead. But she's not quick enough. Thales charges the black hole at her, and as a last resort, she musters the last of her strength to activate the divine pulse. Everything around her shatters like glass and her world falls into darkness. Chapter 2, A New Beginning. It is a new beginning for you, child. Suthies. Byleth calls out, but all she sees is darkness. The time is not ready to awaken me. Where are you? You must wake up now. But where am I? Allow me. A sharp feeling pierces through her chest and she gasps for air, jolting up in shock. Kid. She hisses, the sound clamoring in her head as her chest continued to throb in pain. Come on, deep breaths now. She feels a hand behind her back, stroking her comfortingly. That voice. It's familiar somehow. Were you having that dream again? Her headache subsides, and the voice registers in her ears more clearly. She opens her eyes and turns toward the sound. Her father sits beside her, watching in concern. She jolts, scrambling away from him, falling harshly onto the floor. Hey! Her father is up on his feet now too. What's wrong? Instinctively, she pulls out a dagger from her belt. Where am I? Who are you? Her father, no, this imposter watches her like a deer in headlights. We're at the Empire's military base. I'm your father Dash. She knew it. She's been captured. An Agarthan, she realizes. They have taken upon her father's human form. Immediately, she unsheaths her sword, channeling her rage through her swings. The imposter barely dodges her strike, evidently in shock with her taking the offensive. Byleth. She swings again, but this time, the imposter manages to pick up their lance, blocking her blade with its handle. Get a hold of yourself. As they're occupied with blocking her sword, she kicks them with her free leg. But they only take a few steps back, grounding their stance quick enough to block her next blow. They exchange strikes, blow after blow. She has to admit, her enemy is fast. Faster than she's used to. And their moveset. It's familiar. Very familiar. She recognizes it. They're the Blade Breaker's moves. Her fury heightens. How dare they replicate her father to his every core? She finds an opening, kicking them with such strength that they go flying through the wall. Gasps are heard on the other side. Captain Geralt. She goes through the hole the imposter just blasted through, but before she can make her final strike, a bunch of swords are pointed at her. She firms her stance, scanning who surrounds her. And she almost loses her composure when she recognizes their faces. Mercenaries. Geralt's mercenaries. Byleth. Huxley, one of the mercenaries, gasps. What the hell are you doing? Their swords slightly lower after recognizing her, and her will to fight starts to waver. What's gotten into you, attacking your father like that? Another one, Annabelle, yells. Everybody, relax. The imposter groans, getting up from the ground, rubbing his back. She just had a bad morning. Byleth points her blade at them again, watching their every move cautiously. But the imposter only frowns. They put their hands up, free of any weapon. Calm down, all right, kid? I'm not here to hurt you. Do you mind putting the sword down? She shakes her head. I don't know what's going on, but let me answer your questions again. I'm your father. We are currently at the Empire's military base. She scans her surroundings properly this time, revealing a wooden cabin. Mercenaries fill the room, having eaten by their tables before being interrupted by her spectacle. And there is no mistaking the Empire's flag hanging on the wall. Why are we here? The imposter blinks. We were hired by the Empress to fight for the war. Byleth's face blanches. The war. They're siding with the Empire? But why? She whispers. Why? They respond. Well, we got paid Dash. Their voice muffles out as Byleth concentrates on remembering how she got here. Yes. The Abyss. She had been fighting with the remnants of those who slither in the dark and ordered her forces to retreat. Thales then summoned a black hole. Did she get sucked in by it? No, she couldn't be. If she were sucked into it, she would be staying in utter darkness. So why was she in this strange illusion? Then it clicks in her brain. Just a second before she was about to get sucked in, she was able to activate her divine pulse. Perhaps Thales' dark magic collided with it somehow and messed up with time. But this can't be as simple as just traveling backwards in time. None of this ever happened. She never sided with the Empire. Could never think about doing that now especially. This perhaps is just her worst nightmare being realized. Are you not feeling well, kid? Byleth flinches out of her thoughts, readying her sword again, but she realizes she isn't holding any. Without noticing, the impostor had taken it away from her, giving it to one of the mercenaries behind him. Adrenaline courses through her and she activates her divine pulse. But nothing happens. She stares at her hands in confusion. She clenches them, concentrating as hard as she can to activate it. But time continues to move, unstoppable without her powers. She curses. Fine, she will just cast some spells or fight them barehanded if she must. The impostor takes her hands in a surprisingly gentle manner. Byleth. Her eyes widen as she sees their eyes. Calm down. You're okay. Those eyes. They're filled with the sincerity her father had worn many years ago. She thought that she forgot what they looked like. Her head becomes lightheaded, and she falls unconscious, the sound of her name falling on deaf ears. I mean, she was always weird, but this was just weird, you know? She really just goes feral with anybody, even her own father. I guess that's to be expected from the Ashen Demon. I kind of respect it, not gonna lie. Byleth groans at the annoying voices, blinking away her blurred vision upon waking up. You feeling better? Her eyes flicker to her father, the impostor. At this point, she does not even know who they are, who places a bowl of porridge next to her. Behind her, she notices the wall she broke through is on the process of being repaired by the mercenaries who do not seem to try and keep their mouths quiet. Even awake, they still talk loudly about her. Though, it shouldn't be a surprise, they've always been like that when she was in their group. Her body tenses at how vivid and real everything is, and tenses even more so when the impostor sits next to her. She stares at the ceiling instead, overwhelmed by the familiarity. Can you promise not to attack me? At least just for a few minutes. She slowly nods. Did something happen to you? Byleth can't help but let out a sneer. Did something happen to her? Well, a lot of things happened to her. I'm not from here. She answers. And you are not my father. They are quiet for a long time. I see. Do you mean that we were not related? She looks at them this time, their face deep in thought. Her eyes widen at how accurate their expressions are that it makes her heart ache. I mean that you are an Agar then, are you not? She asks. Are you part of Thales' illusion? Agarth. Thales? Huh. Did you not capture me to enslave me? Enslave you? They look dumbfounded at the notion. Why on earth would I kidnap my own daughter? Her heart clenches at the word. I am nobody's daughter. She murmurs. Not anymore. You are to me, kid. They say. Wherever you came from doesn't matter. You're still my daughter. She hears them sigh heavily before getting up from their seat. I'll leave you alone for a bit, but, take a look around. See if you remember anything. I'll be right here if you need me. She turns her back to him as he leaves for the door, so he won't see her tears. Bye. I heard there was a ruckus at the cabin. Are you okay? Byleth is speechless when Dorothea and Bernadetta run up to her. She nods, unable to process them alive and healthy. She had not seen them like this ever since she fought them 2 years ago. Why were you even fighting? Bernadetta's face pales. I heard it was like you almost committed patricide. Oh dear, Edelgard was really mad that she had to pay for the repairs too. Byleth's eyes narrow at the mention of the Empress name. How did it come to this? Where are we right now? Byleth asks. Dorothea and Bernadetta exchange looks. We're at the intersection between Gaspard and Arundel. On our way to Magdrid. I see. And what year is it? It's Imperial year 1182. 1182. Her eyes widen at the revelation. The war is happening earlier than before. Oh no, Byleth, do you have amnesia? Poor Bernadetta looks like her spirit is getting taken away from her body. No. I just wanted to make sure, that's all. Byleth sighs, trying to take it all in. Please excuse me. She walks around the military base, still finding it hard to believe that she is at the side of the enemy. She passes by the faces of her deceased friends, from Casper to Lindhart to Ferdinand, which brings a rare chill down her spine. She was hoping to bump into Edelgard herself, but she has yet to find signs of the Empress within the military base, including those of her confidant, Hubert. And if the Empire was still in arms, what does that make of the kingdom? Have they fallen, or are the tides yet to be determined? Did they capture Dmitri? Or execute him? She breaks into a cold sweat. Is he back in the darkness? Her heart aches in worry from the uncertainty of it all. She drowns herself so deep in thought that she bumps into another quite abruptly. Ow! Byleth, watch where you are going. Sorry, Byleth says. But then she freezes. Geez, always so hyper-focused on the ground. You're going to hurt yourself eventually. In front of her is an irritated-looking petite woman with red eyes that match her blazing hair tied up in twin buns. She watches her with a smile. That menacing smile. Are you all right? Still sleepy? I heard you got knocked out from a brawl at the cabin. That poisonous voice. Her smile fades. Byleth. Kronia. Blood boils under her skin. So she is among the Agarthans after all. Byleth's hand clenches on the hilt of her sword so tightly that even her crest starts to flare up. Kronia's cunning smile fully falters now into one of fear. Byleth dash. A hand on her shoulder snaps her back to reality. Hey, Monica. The deep voice says. Sorry about my kid here, she's still recovering from what happened this morning. Oh, her smile comes out shakingly. Byleth's jaw drops as she watches the two casually exchange conversation. As if one did not murder the other in another life. Regardless, she instinctively steps in front of the man. Agarthan or not, she's not going to watch history repeat itself for her own sake. Kronia gulps before Byleth's presence. Well, I'll be leaving first. Get well soon, Byleth. Bye now. Byleth watches with a steely gaze as the monster flees with a tail tucked between her legs. Her body continues to tremble, and her breathing starts to become uneven. Kid, relax, her father says. Or imposter. Is he an imposter? Why does he speak so kindly? Byleth shuts her eyes tightly, swatting his hand away. She flees from the scene and the conflicted feelings tied to it. Byleth hugs her knees as she keeps herself warm by the campfire she made at the heart of the woods. The crickets are the only sound accompanying her thoughts that occupied her head long after the sun had set. Getting some space allowed her to think more rationally about the situation, away from all the overwhelming feelings that the military base gave her. For starters, she knows that she indeed traveled back in time, back to the imperial year 1182. But perhaps not the 1182 that she remembers. For the one that she lived through was at the academy, not at the height of the war. Edelgard was not even declared empress yet at the time. If anything, Byleth was not only back in the past, but in a past that did not belong to her world. An explanation could be that Thales sent her here after the collision between his dark magic and her divine pulse. Was she transported to some Agarthan world? She knew of Agarthan's abilities to take upon a host and imitate as human beings. It would make sense. After all, everybody she saw at the base today were all dead. It was possible that the Agarthans used their bodies to take upon their human form, as disgusting as that was. But then what would that make of Dmitri and the others? And she cannot come up with any rational explanation to the Agarthans' end goal. To Thales' end goal. What gain would they have keeping her here? They could have killed her easily when she fell unconscious, but they didn't. Let alone, they can attempt to do so as many times as they wish. She's outnumbered and does not have the divine pulse anymore. She rubs her temples in frustration. There's a rustle in the bushes that snaps her out of her thoughts. Emerging out of the shadows is her father's impostor. May I? They ask. She sighs, nodding, having no energy to argue. They sit next to her, staring at the campfire. I've never seen you this distraught. They begin. To be honest, it rattles me a little bit. I don't know how to help you. She glances at them curiously, their eyes remaining on the fire. I don't know what you're going through, kid. But it won't help if you just keep it in like that. Especially when you don't know what the hell is going on. They look at her now. What I'm trying to say is that I'll be here. Whenever you want to talk about it. She stares back challengingly. Do you know what is going on? After all, you're an Agarthan. They huff out a laugh. I don't even know what an Agarthan is. I'm just a regular old man, I can tell you that. She can't tell if they are even lying. Not with her father's eyes. I cannot tell if you are my father. Byleth admits, staring back at the fire. He died, many years ago. It's hard to tell if you came back from the dead or if you're an imposter. Ah, no wonder. They hum to themselves, pondering. Well, I can promise you, I'm no Agarthan. Nor was I ever dead. So you are just a man. A regular old man. Your father Geralt, if you'd prefer that for now. Geralt. She says. How odd it is to speak his first name. Though it does bring her a sense of ease, so she agrees. Yes, I will use that, Geralt. He nods approvingly. Anyways, I think the simplest explanation that won't make your brain explode is that you're just in the wrong world, kid. The very wrong world. She murmurs. I don't know how to get back. Do you know how you got here in the first place? An Agarthan. She tells him. We battled them, but we were at a disadvantage. I had to order our troops to retreat to the church while I held them back. The church. Geralt's eyes widen in surprise. You work for the church. I am the archbishop. She answers. He goes speechless. WWH. I told you. It's a very different world. I was appointed as archbishop after the war and the restoration of the kingdom. So the kingdom emerged victorious then. We did. She nods. We? You're also part of the kingdom. I am also the Queen of Faerghus. The Queen of Geralt rubs his face, processing all of the news. He lets out a laugh in disbelief. I didn't even know you were into politics. I still am not. She admits. It's just a duty. Well, I'd be damned. Here I thought you would never end up at the church in any lifetime. Marrying into the Blooded line is the last thing I would have expected. How did you meet him? At Garreg Mach. That reminds her. Have you never met him? Here, in this world. As if we could. He says. Never had the chance. Only hear about him from the folks we meet on the road. So that's what is different. She never meets Dimitri in this world. This is a world where she never saved him and the two house leaders from the bandits. That one fateful encounter could change the tides of a war so enormously, it makes Byleth wonder just how much fate she's changed because of her powers. But that one encounter is possibly the only thing that Byleth left to fate naturally, before she developed such powers. That is the true world. That is the one she must return to. She will do everything in her power to get back to it. Back to him. Geralt, she says. Yeah. We have to find a way to side with the kingdom. Kid, I don't think we can just go about it like that. They won't exactly let us leave scot-free. I'm going whether or not you agree to come. She stands up, looking down at him. I swear on my life that no matter what happens, I will return. She made a promise, after all. He stares at her intensely, as if studying her resolve. Then, slowly, he nods. We need to come up with a plan. Chapter 3. Dimitri was amid a discussion with Tadu and Felix when Ingrid barges in the room. Your Majesty, an emergency. Ingrid's voice booms as she steps inside. Dimitri snaps out of his conversation. Ingrid? What is the matter? Her look darkens. Our queen is reported missing. At that declaration, Dimitri immediately jolts up his seat, his body reacting much faster than his brain can process the news. Our queen is reported missing. His wife is missing. The news now hammers down his heart heavily. His voice lowers into a deep whisper when he speaks next. What? She hands him a scroll that she was holding. We received a report from the church written by the leader of the Knights of Syros. We've authenticated it, and the message indeed is under their affiliation. Dmitri unrolls the paper urgently. Your Majesty, we are in need of your aid. Her Grace is currently missing and has been missing for 4 days by the time this letter will reach you. We were on a mission, having traveled to Shamhala to defeat the remnants of Tlazit. The battle left many severely injured, and they wiped out a majority of our troops. We were ordered by Her Grace to retreat while she stayed behind in the battle to hold them off as we escaped. A small rescue team composed of our few minorly injured troops dispatched back to the site a few days later to search for her, but there were no signs of her presence. Nor was there any sign of the leader of Tlazit. The rescue team managed to capture a few Agarthan soldiers. We managed to find out that Her Grace was absorbed by a dark spell, vanishing in thin air. But alongside her disappearance was also that of their leader, Thales. Seath is also currently in critical condition, so I ask for your support during this harsh time. Her Grace has told us to seek for you and the kingdom's support should we face emergencies like this. Catherine. The paper tears in Dimitri's hands as he grips onto it. What do you want us to do, Your Majesty? Ingrid asks. How could this happen? Dimitri's blood runs cold. How is she? Now's not the time to panic, Bor. We need to act. Felix places a firm hand on his shoulder, dragging him back to reality. She needs you. He lets out a shaky breath, raking through his hair with his fingers. Ingrid, he pants, unable to calm the pounding of his heart. Get the wyverns ready. We'll be flying there. Yes, Your Majesty. She salutes, leaving the room as soon as she came in. He inhales. Exhales. He does so a few more times. Didu, you will be coming with me, he says, then looks at Felix. I need you to take care of things while I'm gone. Try to suppress this news for now. We do not want panic to spread within the kingdom. He feels like a hypocrite saying such a thing, when panic has already spread throughout his body, relentlessly pricking onto his skin. You don't have to tell me twice. Felix says. The travel took 3 days, yet Dimitri felt like it was an eternity to reach Gareg Mach. Didu and Ingrid are by his side when they reach the monastery gates. The people around him gasp at the sight of him, bowing respectfully. He nods curtly in return, but shows no sign of slowing down his pace as they reach the doors of the entrance hall. Greetings, Your Majesty. The gatekeeper salutes, surprise etched on his face. We were not informed of your arrival. Pardon us for the impromptu visit. He replies. We're looking for Catherine. Is she here? Right here. She emerges out of the entrance hall, giving them a friendly wave. The 3 Faerghus visitors' jaws drop at the sight of her. What used to be the untouchable Thunderbrand Catherine is now a woman wrapped in bandages. One wraps around her head, covering up her right eye, while the other wraps around her abdomen below her tunic. Her hair is let down and she's out of her armor, making her look like a completely different person overall. Good to see you 3. She grins despite her current state. Catherine. Dimitri can't look away from her. What on earth happened? A concussion. Few burns. Trust me, it looks worse than it actually is. The healers told me I'll recover in a few days. She glances at the gatekeeper then back at them. Better if we talk inside. She leads them to down the entrance hall out to the courtyard. Students crowd around so blissfully that it makes Dimitri grow uncomfortable. They don't know of her disappearance. Catherine says lowly. We're trying to keep it as quiet as possible. I see. Dimitri frowns. We're suppressing it on our side as well. Ingrid comments. If news were to break out, it's no doubt it would stir some strong public reaction. We've essentially lost 2 positions of power. Indeed. Catherine replies, stopping by a door to one of the quarters. And we almost lost the second in command too. She opens the door quietly, and they all step inside. Seath, Dimitri lets out a gasp. The man lies on the bed, unconscious. Bandages wrap around his torso, and fresh blood still seeps through it. His face is swollen with bruises, but it doesn't hide the distress in his expressions even though he's asleep. Flayn, who is sitting next to his bedside, perks up when she hears the door open. Your Majesty. Her eyes widen. She stands up from her seat, giving a curtsy. Please, Flayn, there's no need. Dimitri shakes his head. His gaze is glued to the bed. How is he? Flayn's appearance is disheveled, and crestfallen features take over her face, very unlike her usual self. It's easy to tell that she's sleep-deprived and has been crying for days. He's regained consciousness. But only for a few hours a day. He can't eat much, so he's been losing weight quickly. Yet he must eat to maintain his blood levels. His wounds are still fresh and require constant healing and care. Tears fall from her cheeks, and she covers her face as she sobs. When Cyril brought him back to the monastery, he had lost too much blood. We almost lost him for good. Catherine rubs her back comfortingly. She sighs, gesturing at the visitors to take a seat by the table while she guides Flayn back to Sitha's bedside. She offers them all a glass of water before leaning back against the wall, staring at the bedridden Sitha. There were a lot of people like him in our troops when we retreated to our camp. Not many survived. How did this happen? Dimitri glowers at the table. You remember Thales, don't you? The Agarthan who disguised himself as Lord Arundel during the war. Did you asks? Catherine nods. He's the leader of those who slither in the dark. We thought that the war got rid of him, but seems like he survived. But that's impossible. Didier raises his eyebrows in surprise. We defeated Lord Arundel firsthand. Those were our thoughts exactly. We have a hunch that those who slither in the dark played a part in reviving him. After all, the powers the Agarthans have are still a mystery. You mentioned them in your letter. Ingrid says. Those who slither in the dark. Who are they? You guys know who the Agarthans are. It's the name they give themselves as a group that seeks vengeance against the goddess. Of course, that makes her grace high on their hit list. And the room falls completely silent from her next words. Thales attempted to assassinate her grace not so long ago. Dimitri's whole body freezes at the revelation. She survived, of course. Like she usually does. Catherine half-heartedly jokes. We dug deeper and that's how we came across their hideout. Shamhala. We discovered that there were more like him planning to overthrow the church and kill the goddess for good. She didn't say anything about this. Dimitri murmurs. It all happened immediately after one another, frankly. There wasn't any time. And Lady Rhea insisted that it be kept confidential. This was a matter against the church and the church alone. She didn't want anybody, let alone the kingdom, to interfere. Yet you forget that her grace is also our queen. Dimitri's voice becomes venomous as he stands up from his seat, glaring down at the knight. The kingdom deserves to know if it brings her directly at the face of danger. The riddance of the Agarthans are a highly confidential matter within the church, and it has always been in Lady Rhea's reign. She is not in charge anymore. Dimitri roars. Byleth is. And we swore an oath that you all watched in our union that these matters must be brought to the attention of the kingdom and vice versa. It isn't old news to Dimitri of Rhea's interference in the church. Despite her having stepped down, he knows that she still rules from the shadows. Byleth, to some extent, is a tool for her to control. Goddess knows that Byleth has gone through enough of that. The thought of it makes Dimitri's blood boil. If you all forced her to keep this a secret against her will, I swear. Stop. Flayn snaps as Sith groans in pain. She holds onto his hand tightly, glaring at the group. If you are going to cause a ruckus, I suggest you do it elsewhere. Dimitri sighs, his anger simmering down gradually, being replaced with guilt. You're right. I apologize, Flayn. His gaze hardens as it returns to Catherine. Bring me to Lady Rhea. Lady Rhea, Catherine calls out to the woman kneeling and tending to the small garden outside of the Archbishop's quarters. The King of Faerghus has come to speak with you. She looks up from the flowers, her eyes moving from Catherine to Dimitri. Your Majesty. He does not spare her a greeting. Did you force Byleth to keep her assassination a secret from me? Rhea looks back at the garden. I wouldn't do such a thing. Yet you convinced her, didn't you? That is not your place anymore. She sighs softly, getting up on her feet. Her expression remains calm as she stands before the king's fury. It was by no means to leave you in the dark. She answers. This was an attempt to murder her. He continued. That alone is not just a church matter anymore, and you hid it from us. And now she's missing. Again. Memories of witnessing her fall from a cliff after Thales struck her down comes back to his mind. He lets out a curse, pacing away in frustration. We do not know whether that dark spell killed her. She might not be alive. He cannot bring himself to say the word dead. She holds the power of the goddess Dash. She is not just some mere tool that you can take for granted. He bellows. You put her in the front line, knowing full well that she was the main target. You never saw her as a human. Only a powerful weapon to protect your agenda. If you understand the power she wields, you will understand that she is the only one who could have stopped them. If she didn't go there at all, they would have attempted to assassinate her again elsewhere. At worst, we would also face casualties of innocence. The kingdom could have offered protection, which would then pose you as a threat and potentially involve you and your people in yet another war. One that should not matter to the kingdom. Dmitri falls quiet, drowned in his own frustration. Rhea leaves briefly, entering inside the archbishop's quarters and emerging out with a weapon on her hand. She hands it to Dmitri and his heart breaks as soon as he recognizes it. The sword of the Creator. Why do you have this? His voice almost cracks. Her Grace entrusted it to me to return back to the church. Catherine answers. Before she disappeared. Tears brim at the corner of his eye at the sight. Flashes of Byleth return to him. Her smile, her warm hands, her soothing voice. He may just lose all of that, and the sword of the Creator is proof. Because without it, how can he be sure that Byleth was safe? Have faith, Your Majesty. Catherine reassures. May I say that this isn't the first time she's disappeared. There's still a chance that she is alive somewhere. Thales disappeared along with her. Wherever he is, she most likely is with him too. The voices tingle at the back of his neck, and it takes surmount willpower to keep them quiet. It is not the time for him to wallow in pity. He needs to find answers. And if it's as Catherine says, there is still a sliver of hope that he can save her. No. He needs to save her. No matter the cost. He takes the sword of the Creator from Rhea's hands, strapping it behind him. You will come with us to Shambhala. He orders the former archbishop. And we will not rest until we get her back. Chapter 4. Byleth makes her way to the training grounds, drowning herself in the motions, momentarily forgetting about the fake world that she was brought into. Swing after swing, she imagines her enemy, Thales, in front of her. She has to find him and find a way to get back to her world, no matter what it takes. She regrets not having chased him when he infiltrated the church to assassinate her late in the night. He had disguised as one of the knights that were usually stationed near her quarters. It was not the first time Byleth was ambushed, but at a time of peace, she made the mistake of letting her guard down. He had shown up when she was weakened too. That night, Byleth felt strangely ill and headed for bed earlier than usual. She barely had the strength to fight him at her state, let alone activate her divine pulse. It was like he knew of her powers and when to strike. She only survived thanks to Catherine and Sitha's rescue. After his flee, the priests discovered that there was poison in her system. That confirmed Byleth's hunch that it was a planned attack. They suspected it was a group effort, and that ultimately led to their introduction to Tlazad by Lady Rhea. But why me? Byleth asked her. You are the one who wields the sword of the Creator. Byleth glared at her. Why didn't you tell us about their existence? You are the vessel of the progenitor god. Lady Rhea said. The progenitor god has slumbered deeply for a long time in the holy tomb, and it was her children who stayed behind in Xanadu that protected her. But then Nemesis arrived with tragedy, painting the canyon red with the blood of my brethren. I am the only survivor of the battle at Xanadu. And as the only survivor, I fostered the founding of the empire and prepared my vengeance against Nemesis and his followers. You are Saint Heroes then? Byleth said slowly, absorbing the new information. Yes. I defeated Nemesis and avenged my brethren. But I believe that was not the end. Those who slither in the dark are the descendants of those who seek vengeance against the progenitor god. And now, they have reached the final stage of their revenge. That is why, they're after you, my child. Lady Rhea frowned. Perhaps it would have done you better that you were not left in the dark. I only did it, thinking of your safety. She gazed at her intensely. That is why it is of the utmost importance that this is not revealed to anyone. Byleth hesitated. Surely, we have to share this information to a few trusted confidants. We need enough forces to find them and destroy them once and for all. It is far too dangerous knowledge to be shared to humans. It was humans who posed a threat to the progenitor god, after all, despite our duty to protect them. They have initiated countless wars, challenging the progenitor god herself, as if they were gods as well. I fear that history may repeat itself, should it be known that the progenitor god and her child still roams this world. Byleth shook her head. Times have changed. There are those who swear fealty to the goddess, like those at the kingdom. I believe we need to confide in His Majesty for his support. The kingdom is indeed a loyal follower of the church, but bringing them into this battle is of no relevance to them. As the Queen of Faerghus, isn't it right to treat them as an ally? I believe this can also be viewed as a protection of the Queen, not just the goddess. Byleth persisted. With the long history that has led up to this battle, the matters of the church overrides that of the kingdom. Lady Rhea said. We cannot risk involving the kingdom, when it is the people, including those of the kingdom, that we swore to protect. That is your duty as the vessel of the progenitor god. But it was in Dimitri's right to know was what she wanted to say. Frustration stirred in Byleth. There were enough secrets being kept between them, she didn't want this to pile on top of it. It was like Lady Rhea could read her mind. Are you the Archbishop first or the Queen? Byleth averted her gaze. This is not about what I pick first. This is about those who slither in the dark being a threat to two forms of power. Those who slither in the dark have only ever been a threat to the church, and if you choose to involve the kingdom, it may instigate yet another war. Lady Rhea's step towards Byleth was loud and deliberate. They have suffered enough, my child. It is time to put your duties as Archbishop first to protect the people with the powers that you possess. Her words were final, as they usually were. Byleth. The sound of her name catches her off guard. She swings her sword towards the sound of the voice, the tip of her sword pointing at Edelgard's confidant. Hubert, she says with a hint of surprise as she puts down her sword. It's the first time she's seen him ever since she arrived in this world. It's still jarring to her that they can see eye to eye without having attacks being thrown at one another. Pointing your sword at an ally is not helping you regain your rapport. He says, crossing his arms. This is not the first time either, from what I heard. Do you deem me a threat then? She asks. That wouldn't do. If she wanted to side with the kingdom eventually, she should stop raising suspicion with her current allies. I deem most outsiders a threat. Hubert raises an eyebrow, amused. Though, fortunately for you, you are exceedingly talented. The way I see it, we stand to profit best by keeping you in our service. I see. The tension lifts from Byleth's shoulders. Though I reckon you are aware that we will have to cut your compensation due to the repairs at the cabin. So be it then. She nods. Is that all you came here to tell me? It is not. I need your attendance at the command center. She follows right behind him. As they enter the center, a few soldiers have already gathered around the table inside. All are unfamiliar faces to Byleth. All except for one. Geralt is unavailable right now. Hubert says. I assume his daughter would suffice, Randolph. No, this mercenary is perfect. He says. Thank you, Hubert. His face is so familiar, yet she was unable to put a name on him until Hubert uttered it. Just like all the Empire soldiers she came to slay. This man, the man she struck down, to avoid Dimitri from staining his hands with blood any further, is smiling at her, alive and well. It's like a fever dream. She glances at Hubert in confusion. So what did you need me here for? Lord Lonato, one of Rose-Castled bannermen, has gone to mount a one-man crusade against the Archbishop. He has long held deep enmity for Lady Rhea and likely leapt into action at news of Garreg Mach's fall. He answers. Lord Lonato, Byleth repeats his name in silence. Yet another man back from the dead. She whips her head at Hubert. Did you just say Garreg Mach has fallen? He nods. Indeed. That is why the kingdom mobilized troops in response, and now move to strike Lonato down as we speak. Byleth's mind starts to run its gears. So the Empire has the upper hand. She chooses not to dwell on it, knowing that history could repeat itself, and the tables will turn against them sooner or later. Especially with the kingdom on their heels. Her Majesty has decided to lend him our aid. We must show up in his stead, and fast. Hubert says. It is important that we let our vassals know that their loyalty to the Empire is not unfounded. Still. Hubert taps on his chin, pondering. This matter with Lord Lonato is most troubling. To think he would choose to act on his own. I suspect he could not keep his resentment toward the church in check, seeing as they executed his son. He has another as well, but adopted. He was a student at the officers' academy, though I do not recall his name. Ash, Byleth answers without thinking. She does not miss the surprise in Hubert's face. His name was brought up by one of your comrades. She quickly adds. They said that they studied with him. Yes, we did. Hubert nods from his recollection. I wonder if he acts in concert with Lord Lonato. Is he not siding with the kingdom? Byleth asks, surprised if he would confirm her question. She knew him to be the most loyal knight the kingdom of Faerghus has ever seen. Matched by Ingrid, of course. I doubt it. Randolph interjects. As far as we know, he is. He was spotted amongst their ranks at the Valley of Torment, where they forced our troops to surrender. Then we must remain cautious. Hubert says. If Ash is siding with the kingdom, then they will most certainly dispatch him in this battle. He will pose a big risk should he be more familiar with Castle Gaspard than we are. Are you sure they will? This is a son fighting against his father. Randolph sighs. It won't end well for either of them. Even still, we must be prepared. A wave of déjà vu runs through Byleth. Though she's in a different world, it seems that people's motives are more or less the same. It makes her wonder if the same could be said about the tides of the war. If so, she could use this chance to assess just how much of this world is close to true events. The region northeast of Castle Gaspard is shrouded in deep fog this time of year. Byleth says, remembering the fight from her past life. We can use this to our advantage. Precisely my point, Randolph says, placing his battle map on the table. As we are more familiar with Gaspard territory, we could use the fog as an ambush and focus on attacking long range behind our defensive line. He points at the west of the map. So we can station our mages here while we have some soldiers at the front line take down those the mages can't reach. They must be our most dexterous fighters. That's why I thought of you. You want me to be the main offensive to prevent their front-line troops from approaching. She clarifies. Correct. Her Majesty, of course, has also requested we bring some of her main forces, since they know the territory well enough. But I want you to lead it. You're our best shot in fighting the kingdom with low visibility. While you're at it, it's important that you track and intercept Lord Lonato's son if he's to join this fight. It's the perfect chance. With the fog and directly encountering one of the Blue Lions, she may be able to come up with a plan to join their side without arousing suspicion from the Empire. This has to be her opening. So she can get out of this weird, fake world. She smirks. Understood. Chapter 5. Byleth reads the battle map that Randolph prepared alone at the cabin. The Imperial forces have already dispatched to Gaspard territory and will arrive when the sun rises. That means she only has a few hours until she will cross paths with her fellow Blue Lions. The map is detailed enough for her to scale it in her mind and memorize the terrain. She wants to avoid relying on a torch to light her way. It will only limit her movement, but more importantly, should she do anything suspicious, the fog will be an asset to her. You'll have to rest at some point. She lifts her head up from the map. Geralt. He glances around before he speaks to her in a whisper. Do you know if they'll be in the battle? No confirmation yet. Still, this battle will lead us one step closer to them. She watches him. Did you just arrive back from one yourself? Wasn't anything serious. Though it did bring me a new recruit. Geralt sighs. He can be quite the handful. I see. He lowers his voice again. He might be useful to you, though. Guess we'll see how the kingdom will react to him. What do you mean by that? You'll meet him tomorrow. Okay, she shrugs, her eyes studying the map once more. But after a while, she notices how Geralt still watches her through mindful eyes. Is there anything else? She asks him, her eyes still glued to the map. You know, I've never seen you motivated by much. He tells her. Not until now. I have to return to my world, after all. I don't think it's just that. He continues. It's like it matters a lot to you. It may sound blunt, but I would have thought you would just have gone along with whatever was thrown at you. Including a different world. Her gaze softens. There are people waiting for me over there. He hums in response, stretching his back. Well, since you're motivated so much, I can't help that I want to follow you along with this plan of yours. You don't have to do anything there, specifically. She says. I'll just be assessing the situation. Should it look favorable, I might be able to sway their opinion of us. I'll be right behind you regardless. Don't want the Empire sniffing you out. She observes him, wondering if there is any deceit to his words. Any mannerism that betrays that he is her father. But there are none. When morning rises, Byleth is surprised to see who joined the ranks of Geralt's mercenaries. Alois. She sputters. The sturdy man was talking to Geralt until their conversation was interrupted by her. Hello there. He greets with his usual upbeat manner. You know him? Geralt asks, but then shakes his head. Actually, scratch that. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Why is he here? Since Garreg Mach has fallen, this old friend of mine had to flee. Thought it wouldn't be such a bad idea adding him to the group. But to think I'd run into you here out of all places. It's fate, I tell you. Alois chimes in. To think I'd meet you again after all these years, as a mercenary no less. You are still as skilled as I remembered you to be, Captain. Cut the captain crap, Geralt groans, abashed. I'm just a mercenary now, those days are behind me. And who must you be? Alois turns to Byleth. Ah. Are you the captain's child? She exchanges looks with Geralt. Somehow, this whole conversation feels like déjà vu. He is a stranger to me. Alois lets out a laugh. Great sense of humor, this one. Clearly cut from the same cloth as the captain. She didn't mean it as a joke. And by the way, a small frown crawls in a tint of sadness across Geralt's eyes, he didn't take it as one either. It's enough to make her regret it. The kid here has orders to stay in the front lines. He says, changing the subject. It's our job to back her up should need be. Don't engage in any senseless battle while you're at it. Count me in, Captain. Alois chimes in. I may be a new arrival, but no one can rival my enthusiasm. Byleth's frown deepens at his joke. Even in this life, his jokes are no better. Alois beams at her. Suddenly, Byleth feels exhausted. Let's get going then. Byleth sighs. Welcome, Alois. He grins. It is my pleasure to join you both. Edelgard stands together with her main forces at the front lines. Byleth catches up to them, gaining the attention of the blue-haired fighter. Oh, Byleth is here. Caspar greets. You ready for a fight? It's the first time she sees the Black Eagles gathered all in one place, though there is an additional member in their group that is enough to sicken her to the stomach. Kronia, or Monica, flinches, widening her eyes before averting her gaze entirely. Byleth, Dorothea whispers. You're scaring her. She may be the real Monica, but Byleth can barely resist the urge to take her down. Instead, she gives Monica a final scowl before glancing at the rest of the Black Eagles. It takes her a while to realize though that something does not sit right. Where's Petra? At the mention of her name, the Black Eagles fall silent. She was forced to surrender to the kingdom. Dorothea murmurs. She had no choice, didn't she? Lindhart says. I say it was smart of her to surrender if it would only lead to her death. Although she is not with us, I am quite relieved that she still survived. Ferdinand nods in agreement. But what if we'll face her soon? Bernadetta trembles. I don't want to fight her. Edelgard's face turns solemn. Let's not dwell on this matter any further. Should you encounter her in any of your upcoming battles against the kingdom, I suggest you don't hold back. Force her to yield if you must. It might still be possible to regain her as an ally. Despite the grimness amongst the Black Eagles, Byleth can't help but wonder how much advantage the kingdom now has with the Princess of Brigid on their side. She's incredibly fast and nimble. A fog like this wouldn't slow her down. The kingdom would be smart to put her and their troops against them. Still, there is no doubt that the kingdom has a strong offensive. Edelgard admits. After all, Shay is within their midst. Who is Shay? Byleth asks. The Black Eagles turn to her in surprise. Why, he's the captain of the kingdom's private army and your sworn enemy. Dorothea gasps. He always talked about you during our time at the monastery. You wiped away his entire mercenary company in one swoop. She merely blinks at her. Purple hair. She continues. A little more vivid than Bernie's. Eep. Bernadetta squeaks. Please don't compare me when you're talking about sworn enemies. Huh. Byleth's eyebrows narrow, struggling to recall a mercenary with purple hair. I have no memory of him. Wow, she's cold. Casper's eyes widen in amusement. I guess you're not the Ashen Demon for no reason. At any rate, he is one of the most skilled fighters to join their ranks. Hubert tells her. As he is also a close-range combatant, it is possible that you will encounter him first. Byleth nods, unfazed yet curious about this mystery man. I will hold him back then. They finally reach Magdrid Way. It is shrouded in a fog so thick that they can't even see the trees surrounding them, let alone spot the lord they are supposed to protect. The fog is rather thicker than I imagined, Hubert. Edelgard purses her lips. And if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I agree. Hubert says. Dark magic is assuredly the cause. We already know those who slither in the dark have had comings and goings at House Row. Her ears perk up at the mention of Twist. I doubt one of them is here, but there could be a mage present who received their training. Then we had best leverage our own assets. Edelgard says. Why is everyone whispering? Ferdinand interjects the ominous conversation, albeit too loudly. Is the enemy aware of our coming? It's entirely possible, yes. Monica says in a hushed tone. They could be directly on top of us and we would scarcely know it. So yes, let us all stay on our toes. Prudent of you to bring it up, Ferdinand. Ah, thank you. He cringes at his loud volume, silencing himself into a whisper. I mean, thank you. Byleth hears a rustle in the leaves. A light brightens up within the fog. A magic spell. Scatter. Now. Byleth yells. They do as they're told, before the spell can blast at any of them. The closer we get, the denser the fog. Ferdinand says as they start to disperse, ready to engage in the battle. I can barely make out my own feet. Which will prove useful for Lord Lonato. Hubert adds. As he possesses low numbers, the man will doubtless take any edge he can get. We need to find him before the kingdom does and take him into our protection. Edelgard orders. Then we just have to find the kingdom first. Byleth says, running ahead of them. She cuts through the fog, following the map she traced in her mind. She strikes the kingdom soldiers that come her way, but deliberately makes sure that it is not fatal enough to lead them to their deaths. The fog is also thick enough to avoid them from recognizing her, as she charged through them before they can take a second look. She runs around the area without losing momentum, dodging and striking enemies, or potential allies, that come her way. Yet, she is unable to spot a single person from the Blue Lions. Are they not in this fight? She should have known that she might not be encountering them so soon. But finally, she hears a voice that booms amongst the other loud battle cries. You will pay in blood for invading the lands of Faerghus. A female voice yells within the fog. A voice that Byleth has been accustomed to over the years. Adrenaline courses through Byleth's body when she finally sees a blue lion for the first time. Ingrid speeds past her on her Pegasus, scattering the fog enough for Byleth to see her clearly. Her hair is shorter than Byleth remembers, but it is undoubtedly her. She strikes down multiple Imperial mages with her lance, taking them down one by one with her might alone. Byleth hesitates, thinking whether she should engage with Ingrid now. But before she can do so, another familiar voice shouts. "How could you betray His Majesty, Lonato? How could you do this to me?" Ash. Lord Lonato's mouth went agape. "You came here, for me? It was my choice to come here, and I must not waver." The sound of Ash's voice is enough to ground Byleth back to her original plan. She makes a beeline towards him loud enough to draw his attention. As soon as he's alerted by her presence, he aims his arrow at her. He'll shoot at the left shoulder first, she thinks. And that's exactly what he does. Then at the legs. Again, she predicts correctly. She smirks to herself. She knew of his strategies from her original life, and she's glad that it's the same even here. After all, she's the one who taught him. He strikes at the shoulder to catch the enemy off guard, then shoot at the legs to slow down their movement. He never shoots at the heart first. Byleth always thought it was risky of him to pull strategies like that, where he essentially leaves his foe's death uncertain, but that's just the kind of merciful person he is. She closes the distance between them, leaving Ash no choice but to run. She continues to chase him until she sees that no Imperial forces are within sight. As soon as she knows they're alone, she slashes her sword just a hair away from Ash, causing him to fall backwards down to the ground. Ash reaches for his arrow, resorting to attacking her at close range, but she kicks the weapon out of his hands. She points the sword at him. Ash glares wildly at the sword, then at her. His breathing is uneven and the trembling of his body is not left unnoticed by Byleth. So, slowly, she lowers her sword. She scans around her once more before she speaks next. "If you do not retaliate against me, I will not fight back," she tells him lowly. "If you do not actively seek me in battle, I will not engage." It's not enough to ease his trembling, but his glare does shift into a look of surprise. "Send that message to your main forces." "You're sparing me? But why?" Before she can answer, she hears a rustle of the leaves within the fog. She readies her sword for the intruder. A flash of familiar orange hair peeks out of the fog. "Sylvain," she mutters to herself. He charges towards her in a flash. He's dismounted from his stallion, it seems. She must be careful not to hurt him. Her body freezes when another face emerges out of the fog. His face is scarred, crossing over his features. "Miklon." The man lets out a battle cry, swinging an axe towards her. She barely manages to snap out of her surprise to dodge it on time. "Humph, looks like I'm late." Miklon clicks his tongue. "Guess I'll get working on my orders." Why is Miklon here? Have they intersected with some outliers from the war? But why would bandits come to Gaspard, especially with this fog? She can wonder about that later. She has to protect Ash. She's about to swing at him when Ash cries, "Miklon, watch out." Once again, she's caught off guard, turning back at Ash. "You," she utters with a gasp. "You're looking out for him?" This time, she snaps out of her surprise too late. Miklon lands a hit on her shoulder with his axe. Byleth grunts in pain. Irritation begins to grow within her, striking at him despite her injury. Even with it, she's still faster than he is. "I'll stop the enemy dead in their tracks." He yells at Ash as he blocks her blow. "You lot use your brains and figure out how we win this thing." Ash scrambles to his feet, fleeing the scene and picking up his bow on the way. Miklon's scowl returns to her, which she reciprocates with more anger. "Why are you here?" She spits the question with distaste. "Huh." Byleth channels her rage through her attacks. "Enough of this foolishness." She hisses as her attacks become wilder and faster by the minute, adrenaline washing away any sore pain she felt on her shoulder. Miklon starts to struggle, now taking the defensive. Byleth sweeps him from below and he loses his balance. She's about to take the final blow, but her attention shifts to another presence emerging from the fog. She blocks the incoming enemy with her sword. The enemy stares at Miklon. "This one's mine." She looks at him from head to toe as they grind their swords. Purple hair. A mercenary with a vengeance. This must be Shay. He smirks at her. "Heh. Didn't think I'd get another shot at the Ashen Demon this soon. She holds back her strength, evaluating this foe's skill. He doesn't waste a breath in his swings. He attacks her more so with the sword on his right hand before slashing her with his other one towards her blind spots. "You're more capable than I expected," she says as she defends against him nonchalantly. He grits his teeth in frustration. "Don't think you can fool around with me." She continues to block, analyzing his technique. But even more so, analyzing him as an individual. She wonders if he's a valued ally of the kingdom. Or just another mercenary on a contract. Regardless, she does not want to take any risk. If he's the strongest one the kingdom's got, then she best not put him in harm's way. So she'll just have to finish this fight quick. She can feel the pain on shoulder beginning to catch up to her. Byleth then ducks, landing a punch on him to catch him off guard from the sudden hand-to-hand combat approach. It's enough for him to step backward and for her to gain the offensive, swinging her sword with such force that it swipes away the sword he holds with his right hand, removing his dominant sword from his grasp. Just in time. The swelling on her shoulder is worse now. As Shay gets distracted in retrieving his sword, Byleth flees the scene. She presses her hand, emitting some faith magic on her injury, but it's not enough to stop the bleeding. Miklon didn't just minorly graze her, but managed to almost cut her arm off. She had to find Dorothea or Lindhart before she loses too much blood. As if on cue, the fog lifts up, clearing the battlefield. Byleth looks at the sky. She can see the sun shining brightly from above, and Geralt coming towards her on his steed. "Kid, we have to get going." Geralt extends his hand towards her. She scans at the battlefield. With the fog now cleared up, she now sees that the battlefield reveals a fallen Lord Lonato. They failed. Next to Lord Lonato's body, she sees Ash, who stares at his adoptive father, distraught. But moments later, his eyes find hers. His gaze is hardened, yet the frown on his face reveals a hint of conflict. She did what she could for now. She takes her father's hand and sits behind him on his steed. The Empire is watching her. She can't blow her cover. Not yet. The Empire retreats to their military base with fewer numbers than when they left. Byleth sits on one of the healing beds at the cot. The healers are too busy tending to those more injured than her, so she goes ahead and wraps a bandage around her shoulder herself. But she starts to feel lightheaded. Perhaps she didn't tighten it enough. "Allow me." Her gaze, now hazy, barely makes out Lindhart's face in front of her. He carefully removes the bandage she just wrapped, emitting a faith spell from his hands that numb the pain on her shoulder. Her vision starts to clear up and she lets out a shaky exhale as the pain soothes. "Thank you." She then sees Ferdinand and Edelgard talking amongst themselves with such distressed expressions. "What's going on?" she asks Lindhart. His face turns solemn. "Dorothea surrendered. The kingdom took her with them." Byleth's eyes widen. Yet another one the Blue Lions have spared. First Petra, now Dorothea. The kingdom seems to be more merciful than they once were. If that's the case, her chances to change alliances are not so low anymore. She continues to observe the duo that converses in harsh whispers. Though Edelgard attempts to remain stoic, Byleth can see the silent fury in her eyes and in the way she clenches her fists. Unbeknownst to them all, the breath Byleth releases is one of relief. After being tended to, Byleth heads back to her quarters at the cabin, where the number of the mercenaries staying there also dwindled after the battle against the kingdom. It saddens her, but she's lost them once before. Somebody knocks on her door. "Come in," she says. The door opens, and it's none other than Geralt who reveals himself. "Hey," he says. He looks at her shoulder. "How's your injury?" "Better. Though I will have to put off from any upcoming battles for a while," she replies. "I can barely feel my hand." "The kingdom folks are tougher than I thought," he says with a hint of amusement. "He wasn't from the kingdom," she snaps. The image of Miklon emerging from the fog repeats in her mind. "Miklon is not a part of the kingdom," she repeats with more spite. "Are you talking about the eldest son of Gautier?" She stares at him, mouth agape. "You know him?" "Yeah, he's one of the commanders of the kingdom's troops." Geralt replies. Had to deal with him in one of our earlier skirmishes. A commander. Did she just hear that correctly? From what I've heard, the kingdom had captured him a few years ago for his crimes. But instead of jailing him, the king decided to make use of the guy's combat skills and made him commander of one of his smaller forces. The people of the kingdom say the king did so in the belief of redemption. The king believes in redemption. That explains why the fellow Black Eagles have been spared. But it's not enough to prevent the shock written all over Byleth's face. Sure, in her life, Dimitri also believes in the act of redemption now, but during the war? That was unfathomable for him. Not when he believed that he himself could not be redeemed. Jail time wouldn't even be the fate of Miklan. He would have been dead where he stood. And it still haunted him, Byleth knows that for a fact. The nightmares that crawled in his mind more nights than none. How he would whimper in his sleep. How tears would sometimes stain his cheeks, trailing down to the marks on his pillow. Her unbeating heart ached whenever she saw the sight. All she could do was hold him, cradling him in her arms until she saw that he was able to sleep once more. And every morning, he would wake up with a smile, telling her that he loved her and that he was grateful that she was by his side. But she knew she was not doing enough. How she wanted to do everything in her power to put his mind at ease when he slept. She could only stare helplessly as she held him in his arms, reassuring him that all would be all right. Does the Dimitri in this timeline still have nightmares? How different is he from the one she knows? Her heart clenches, worry coursing through her veins from all her unanswered questions about her husband. Honestly, I call bull, Geralt says, snapping her out of her spiral. After all, the kingdom is fewer in numbers. They need all the hands they can get. Even a man like Miklan. That probably is the only thing she does not accept about the kingdom so far with a passion. Unless Miklan was a saint sent from the heavens above, she saw no other reason as to why he should be put in such an esteemed rank. Not after all the harm he inflicted upon his younger brother. She glowers at the ground. Though the empire seems to be the same as it once was, the kingdom now feels like an enigma to her. If he didn't show up, I might have gained Ash's trust. Byleth says. I may just be a bigger threat to them now. We still have more battles to come. Geralt reminds. This isn't your last chance to sway them. Her patience is running thin. If only she had her divine pulse to assist her in the battle, she could have had more time. Will Suthies ever awaken within her? Or was she not the vessel of the progenitor's god in this world? It's frustrating to wait for chances. Not when we must turn the tides for the kingdom and the church as soon as possible. Geralt stays silent for a moment. I've been meaning to ask you something, by the way. She glances at him. What is it? He pauses for a moment, before he breaks the ice. What made you decide to become Archbishop? She looks back down again. I had no choice. Fodlan was in need of repair after the destruction caused by the war. At the time, Lady Rhea was badly injured and fell ill. So I had to take over her position. So you became Archbishop, because of convenience? No, not that. Lady Rhea chose me specifically because I was the vessel of the goddess. When she turns to look at Geralt, she notices how his expression turned dark. So that's what she did to you, Geralt frowns. All those years ago. She watches him carefully. So it still happened here. You fled the church because you were suspicious of her. He nods. She did something to you once you were born. After, your mother passed away. You didn't cry at all. I knew that she had a hidden motive with you, and I didn't want to risk your life. Not when I already lost your mother. She notices how glazed his eyes are as he speaks about the memory. The consistent sincerity in his eyes, her own suspicions of him start to waver. That means I'm still the vessel. Byleth confirms, but she's not sure if it is from relief or disappointment. Though her one question still stands. When will Suthies wake up? Check the description for the links to the author.